The Douglas Coleman Show is made possible with support from Seth David Radwell, a recent guest on the program and author of American Schism, How the Two Enlightenments Hold the Secret to Healing Our Nation, released this past July. As Publishers Weekly writes in its recent glowing book life review of American Schism, business executive Radwell's epic debut examines the historical influences that have led to what he sees as the collapse of politics in the United States. Seth Radwell makes the case that the current chasm between the American right and left can be traced back to the 18th century's Age of Enlightenment and the basic tenets of liberty, equality, and reason. American Schism provides a historical perspective that can help us fight today's unreason with reason and bridge current-day divides. American Schism by Seth David Radwell is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. For more information, go to americanschismbook.com.
It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Dr. Karin Jakubowski. Hello, Karin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Douglas. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let's see, right off the bat here, now, you don't have a book, right? You're not promoting a book? You're just kind of...
I don't have a book yet.
Okay.
It's somewhere inside me, Doug.
Oh, I believe it.
No,
I believe that.
But I would love to write a book one day. It is a dream that I have.
Okay, now the reason I ask that is because we get a lot of authors on, and I'm looking through your bio here that was sent to us from your PR people, and usually there's a book. So that's why I was kind of scrolling through looking for a book title, but okay, that's all right. So we're just going to talk about what you do, which is Empowerment Coach, International Influencer. And there's a word that's popping out of the page here that I see a lot with other people that I want to get a definition, because I think people see the word a lot, but they don't really know what it means. Mindfulness.
Yeah.
Can you define that?
Well, Douglas, it's interesting. So my first introduction to what mindfulness is was through an organization called Mindful Schools. They have a curriculum where we had a coach come in and actually teach kids mindfulness lessons within our elementary school. I'm an elementary school principal here in Delaware. And the definition that I learned through a program I took 2 of their courses with was just being aware of the present moment without any judgment. So just noticing what you notice, what you hear, sense, feel, what you can touch, what you can smell in the present moment without any judgment. And what's unique about that is I can simply either stop here, but the more, because I have my own podcast called Momnificent, so I've been inviting guests on authors and speakers on across the country, and several of them talk about mindfulness, professors, and some of them have a slightly different definition of it. And so it's been fascinating just learning the different fields within mindfulness of what they mean that are slightly, different in some way. But we'll start with that simple definition for you for now.
Okay. Well, when you give me that definition, what comes to mind immediately is Buddhism. It's the idea of clearing your head. There's also overlaps of this with Hindu, with Indian culture about meditation and about using mantras. It kind of, a lot of it overlaps. I mean, are we in the same ballpark with mindfulness?
Yes, and we get that question a lot from parents, because when you tell parents you're doing mindfulness with their kids at school, some question, okay, are you sitting cross-legged? Are you holding your hands a certain way? Are the lights on or off? Like, what are you telling the kids, right? I don't want my kid to be a Buddhist. Like we get all kinds of responses. And so what I share with them is within the lessons of the mindfulness, like the kids are encouraged to close their eyes or look down at the floor because some kids are uncomfortable really keeping their eyes closed. And they're just sitting comfortably, at their seat. And we do have them, invite them to close their eyes, and you just ring a chime and we sit for like 1 minute and you build up to like 2 minutes as long as the class still can handle that. And then the lessons that are included in that program are really letting them be aware of their senses. So like one lesson is just noticing what you hear, noticing what you see. And we created some videos on a YouTube channel that a fifth grader started for me because they knew more about it than I did, just to show parents what it was about and what we were doing, because you say mindfulness and people are like, oh, great, but no one really knows what we're doing.
It seems to me that very young children are already born that way. And as we get older, our brain gets clogged with all of this life experience and information and things that people have told us, particularly our parents, and we start to repeat all of that. It's like a tape recorder. Your brain's like a tape recorder, and you start putting in all of this information, and it just is in a loop, and it starts playing over and over again. But little kids seem to be sort of free of that. They operate more on a mindfulness level, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that, because when we did and do this mindfulness with kids, I am amazed how they just kind of do it so well. I mean, there's so many adults who I talk to and they're like, I can't sit for 10 minutes in silence. Like, I hear so many adults struggle with it, and yet with kids, the majority of them, we can get them to like sit and, sit for us for like 1 or 2 minutes. And then the practices, the breathing practices that we teach them, they actually use them, like to the point where, Douglas, they would go home and tell their parents about it. You can't even get a kid to tell them what they learned in school that day. And they were offering these strategies to their siblings and their parents, even saying to their parent, like, I think you need to do the ball breath, Mom. Are you feeling okay? Like, who does that? So I have been amazed at the results of what these lessons, what I have observed the kids doing and using with them, to the point where I started interviewing a couple of them, and they would say they would use the breathing activities before a test when they usually got stressed out. One kid in fifth grade even shared with me that on the weekend he wanted his mom's attention to do something or other he was doing, but she was helping the older brother, and he got frustrated because he wanted her to help him now. And then he remembered, he tells me, his breathing strategy, and he used it. And all of a sudden he was like, I'm fine. Okay, Mom can help him, and when she's ready, I'll be okay, and she'll help me. Like, this is incredible. Like, when I started hearing kids self-reporting this stuff, and then the mindfulness coach, when she came in, she had a questionnaire for the 2nd through 5th graders. And at the end, 40% of them said they thought it helped them sleep better at night. And I was like, if I can get one kid to sleep better at night, I'll do whatever it takes, let alone that it helped them on their tests. They felt more calm. They thought it should be taught to other kids. They were teaching it to their sibling. So when I saw that data, I was like, wait a second. I've been waiting for the state to bring us more resources in this area to support kids. And yet this is a very proactive, almost therapeutic approach where you're teaching them a skill and a strategy that they're going to continue using. And the whole thing has just, I've just not, then I'm like, I'm so committed to this work because of that I'm like, I can't not do this and help more kids learn this. So yes, I think there's something so powerful with young kids and this practice. And it's probably for the very reason you said.
Well, and I also think that this whole idea is great because it's something that the kids can actually learn at school and then take it home and teach it to their parents, which, for the most part, math and science, and it's probably unlikely they're going to teach anything to their parents that that their parents don't already know. But this, I think, is really quite interesting. And now let me ask you, you said that you are a principal at an elementary school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you implement this? Is this something that you teach or you give to the teachers, or do you run a course yourself at the school?
So when we had the mindfulness coach come in for those 8 weeks, I was at the same time taking the course to learn the lessons she was teaching, because it was kind of a chunk of change in our budget to bring her in. So I figured if I get trained, I'm seeing the powerful effects of this this can't go away, but we might not be able to fund her every year in the future. And so with my personal experience with meditating that I found personal benefit from, and then watching what these kids were learning and using and the parents' feedback of it, it was like I said, I couldn't not do this work. And so I ended up learning the lessons and started teaching it kind of like here and there to continue it. And then that's when COVID happened and we all went home. And because I had started some of the videos and had created a YouTube channel, I actually continued all that summer long doing videos, like weekly announcement videos with a little mindful moment, which just kept me connected with the kids and parents all summer, to the point where when we came back to school last year, the kids would see me in the hallway and they'd be like, I saw you on the video. I watched your video. Oh, when are you doing that? Like, they were asking me when I was going to do another mindfulness lesson. It was amazing. So I haven't done a good job of teaching it in the last 2 years, because when COVID happened and we all came in half in person, half remote, it was such an awkward year for everybody and challenging on many levels that I wasn't able to implement it like I kind of thought I would. So only this month did I actually start offering after school on Zoom for 20 minutes, like after the kids get home at 4:30. I'm starting to do these mindfulness lessons, and it's been so much fun and so fascinating. And then I pull in some picture books from authors who write picture books on mindfulness, and one of the authors is coming on our session next Tuesday. I mean, this is just so amazing.
Oh, that's great. Oh, where did you get the idea to start this at school?
Probably because, my school counselor came to me one day, like 3 or 4 years ago, saying her daughter was taking these mindfulness lessons from a mindful coach in the neighboring elementary school. And that was the first I heard of this. I was like, what is that? And like, tell us more. And she was so excited about it. She was like, we have to bring this coach to North Star. And I was like, okay. So we put like some grant money together, some of the building budget money, and we only funded the first grade as a pilot in the spring. And that's where even one teacher, Douglas, was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And what is this about? And I was like, well, I don't know either, but we're all just going to like watch and observe as this coach just does her thing. Well, at the end of the 8 weeks, that same teacher literally came to me and said, I'm doing the practices myself. These are so good and powerful. I'm doing it with my own kids at home as well as with my classroom. And so I offered the first level course from Mindful Schools to all my staff, and about 5 committed and took the online training, which was one of the first sessions. So that was just really how I heard it and started with it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there is a certain level of resistance with this kind of thing, particularly in the Western world, because it's very foreign to us. I spent 3 years in Thailand teaching English back in 2007, 8, 9.
Oh, wow.
And so I got this sort of firsthand, and I came home with a whole different mindset. And it was the best thing I ever did for myself, because I was coming off of 20 years working in the financial district in Boston. So it was like,
oh my gosh, what a change!
Yeah. It was
wow.
From one side of the coin to the other. But I needed it. I needed to get out of that rat race. I needed to clear my head and get back to where I used to be.
Wow.
So all of this is familiar to me, and it works. I mean, it really does work. But like you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, that the parents might be a little bit, are they burning candles and incense in the classroom, and oh my God, what's happened? And I can see how particularly American parents might be a little bit hesitant with this, or a little suspicious, but I think once they figure out what it is. Now, one question I did want to ask is, have you seen any academic improvements as a result of this? Are you getting higher test scores with the kids after they've done this process?
Well, I don't know. Hold on. You're putting me on the spot. Give me a second to think.
That's
it's
all right.
Interesting now that you say that, because we were just nominated a National Blue Ribbon School, which is the highest award you can earn in the country as a school. And now that you're saying that, the year they pulled our scores that qualified us to be nominated for that award was the year we had those mindfulness classes. I never made that connection until just now.
I mean, that's something that you can use as a sort of a PR tool for this. You know, when you have parents that might be a little suspicious, you say, "Hey, look, this is going to improve their stats." So it's you know, anything you can use, I suppose, tools in the arsenal.
And I haven't personally gotten many questions from the parents, which is kind of surprising to me because I know it's out there that you can get a lot of pushback. And I do know, so I'm in the state of Delaware. We're in the northern part of Delaware, which is a very small state anyway. But down south, which is only like 2-3 hours, there was a large push for mindfulness practices within the schools, but parents in those communities took it and either misunderstood it or weren't as informed or were informed, but still felt like it was, like you were saying, like shifting their religion or their beliefs,
right.
And they didn't want them to do that. It was growing at such a rate, and it really hit a standstill and declined in its growth if mindfulness in those schools in the South right here in Delaware, to the point where right now I feel like we're coming back from that, and we're not. Because even I interviewed someone downstate, and they were like, wow, you know, I hope you don't get, you know, the kickback that we got when we tried to really grow this here in the southern part of our state. So you're right. It's very real, and it's out there, and it happens. And I've experienced it personally here, maybe because we're doing it in such a very slow way, or I don't know. But I do know that has happened even here in our state.
Well, educational curriculum has been a very hot-button topic over the last year, and as you saw probably in Virginia and in other parts of the country where parents are getting angry and rejecting things like CRT. And this tends to get lumped into teaching religion, to teaching, do you know what I mean? It sort of all gets lumped together with this. And I think parents, if they don't really take a look at it, will say, this is just more indoctrination. This is more brainwashing to our kids that we don't want. And they won't even bother to sort of dissect it and take a look at it. And it's too bad because it really has nothing to do with any of that.
No, and it's such a, especially with the mental health needs of kids. Oh my gosh, pre-COVID mental health needs of kids. Yeah. And to know that we can instill in kids a strategy to help them through stress and uncertainty with these practices, this is like so huge. And people can't even find therapists right now. Everyone's booked, sold out, overbooked. You can't even get your kid into therapy if you wanted to. It's so hard right now. And yet these practices, if more people were open to it, to teach their children this, they could actually be empowering them. It's just so powerful, as you know.
Let me ask you something about COVID. During the pandemic, schools pretty much were closed. Some were kind of open. It was different around the country. But did you notice anything particular that this was affecting kids and how it was affecting kids? Was it primarily the socialization, that they were stuck in the house all day and somebody had to be there, somebody had to take time off from work? Or did you just see that the stress level went up and that it affected the ability of the kids to concentrate and to study?
So we saw a variety of things. We saw parents who were working in the next room who had to keep their job and weren't able to sit with their child who was in kindergarten. So we had teachers, struggling with the kindergarten, not really paying attention on Zoom because legitimately their parent couldn't sit there to keep their job, to the point where we had third grader who said that being on Zoom actually helped her study and focus more than in the classroom. For her, it was less stimulating of an environment, that she found the benefit of it. And then conversely, we had kindergarten and first grade kids who were off the charts behavior problems do exceptionally well on Zoom and not be a problem behavior at all. It was so, we saw so many opposite things that we that really confused us, that we were trying to figure out as we went through this. And I just go back to how resilient kids are. And I don't know that we give them enough credit. I think it was harder on the adults than the kids. Majority, it's not everybody. But when we came back, now we're dealing with a couple kids, but it's not even mass kids who were home for all last year, and now they're coming into school and they have the little bit of the social anxiety, or they're not, they don't ask a friend to play, they kind of stay themselves, and they have difficulty navigating this thing we call school, because that second grader went home mid-kindergarten and hasn't been in the building since, and then we had to have the kids cohort for recess this year, and that was the biggest thing kids were crying about, because their friends were in another class and they couldn't even play together at recess. So that just lifted this past week, where the masks are now optional. And you would, if you had come in the building, you could feel the excitement as if we'd given them all their dream vacation and $1 million. Like, these kids were so excited. And we are dealing with a handful at each grade that are still struggling academically, that we think didn't get the best education on Zoom, which I don't know how well anybody can do a Zoom lesson for however many hours a day. It's just not what they were set up for. And we are seeing gaps in their learning because of that, those that were remote. But so we've seen all kinds of things, and things unexpected, like I shared.
Well, I had a guest on, and I can't remember his name, but he was a doctor, retired, education, and he was an advocate for going completely online, like getting rid of the brick and mortar schoolhouses altogether. And my reaction was that I think it's fine for university level up. I mean, if they wanted to blow up Harvard and Yale, I'd have no problem, and have everybody go online. But I think with little kids, I think that socialization skills are so important. And my other argument was that many, and I would say most, parents are completely ill-qualified to teach their children in homeschooling.
You're absolutely right.
So yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was just to finish. I mean, his argument was that kids had been homeschooled for centuries, that the idea of a schoolhouse had only been in the last maybe 150 years or so, that prior to that, kids were taught at home. If they were wealthy, they had a nanny. And if they were poor, the kids had to just fend for themselves, which created a huge division between the wealthy and the poor, particularly in places like England and in Europe. If you look at historically in the 1700s, 1800s. Okay, not to get too deep into that, but the more practical or more modern reason is the fact that these days both parents work. See, when I grew up, I mean, I'm 60 years old. When I grew up, it wasn't the norm. Mom stayed home and baked cookies and dad went to work, right? Yeah. But now, I mean, most couples, they both work. So somebody's going to have to give up their job or tweak it so that they can work from home. But even if they have to work from home, they're not going to have all the time to dedicate for 6 hours a day or whatever to be with their kids. And I just think that between the stress on the parents and the lack of socialization for the small children, I think up through high school, but particularly your grade, elementary school, I think it could be devastating. What do you think?
So it's so interesting that you mentioned this, because I had a guest on my podcast, and can't remember her name either off the top of my head, but I was telling her that what is happening with our kids every year, they're coming to school with less and less social skills. Like, what is wrong with these parents? Why can't they teach them? And why, like, that was my whole spiel. And she's like, Karin, wait a second. Kids learn to socialize through play. If we were giving kids true play, she's like, when I was a kid, we had 3 recesses at school. I'm like, 3 recesses? It's amazing we have 1. 3? Like, what are you talking about? And she shifted my whole thought on this, where if we give kids more opportunity to play, true play, where they're going out to recess and doing whatever they want, nobody's telling them they have to do X, Y, or Z. Like, whatever comes in their mind, they're going with it. Through that, they end up having to learn to compromise, because a kid doesn't want to play what they want to play. They have to adapt because that kid wants to play this. All those skills she was telling me, that's where they learn that socialization piece. So
yeah.
So you know what I did? Well, actually, when COVID happened and we all went home, and then we came back last school year, not this one. Last school year, the district gave choice to parents to stay home remote or come in. So I had 600 kids, 400 came in, 200 stayed remote. And because we were so concerned kids were having way too much FaceTime. In kindergarten and first grade, we put in 2 recesses. That's the first time we'd ever done that historically. I've been here 10 years. Well, this year, kindergarten kept it going. First went back to our normal. But then when I did this interview with this lady, Heather Shoemaker, that's her name. Oh, she wrote this book, It's Okay to Go Up the Slide, and other renegade rules that we tell kids, don't talk to strangers. But wait a second, if we really look at it, here's why we should let kids talk, because we want them to be able to meet new people, and they need that skill as they grow. Like she really challenged my thinking. And because of her interview, I put 2 recesses back into my first grade class. I'm like, get those kids out there doing whatever it is that they want to do, because that's where they're going to learn these skills that we need them, that they're all coming in with less and less of. So I think I would argue that point with the gentleman that you had shared.
Well, I think so too. I agree with you. And growing up as an only child, I can attest to the fact that when we become adults, we typically have harder time adjusting socially than kids who came from multi-sibling families, because I don't want to use the word spoiled, but we were able to capture all of our parents' attention. There wasn't another brother or sister that you had to wait in line for, for dad's attention or mom's attention. The problem being with that is that if that's your home environment, when you get to school, you bring that with you, and it doesn't work when you're in a schoolyard with 50 other kids. It doesn't work. And only children have a much more difficult time. Not all, but I've seen it with friends. In fact, there was one point in my life when I was in my 30s that when the online groups just were coming on, like back in the early 2000s, late 90s, and I joined this only children's club just to talk to people. And it was just a social text type chat. And everybody had the same thing. Everyone said exactly the same thing. They said it was so difficult for them when they grew up, particularly when they started dating and when they started having serious relationships. They said there was a real challenge to get over that. You got to share.
Not the only one, right? So all those skills, I think you're absolutely right. So to bring this back to what we were talking about, that if kids were to go online, they're going to lose that, and I think that's not good. That human factor, nothing replaces that, and I think there's something important to that I don't think is human of us, to only be seeing someone through a device. Yeah, you can apply this to the whole world right now. In one sense, because everybody has a smartphone, we're all connected to each other at any moment. And yet, if you look at the state of the world, we're on the brink of World War III. So what happened? What happened to this unity amongst the planet because of these wonderful technological devices? Didn't do anything, did it? Mankind is still the same. It's still, the battle of good and evil is still raging on as long as the Bible's been around. And I mean, it's laughable, except it's not funny. And that's sort of the, I suppose that's the conflict in my brain today, is you're seeing all these terrible things going on in the Ukraine. And then I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. We were supposed to have fixed this. This wasn't supposed to happen anymore. Yeah. But then other people who are more steeped in faith, and I'm not preaching about religion. I'm just saying that the people that I know, that they're saying, well, what did you expect? The man has always been good and evil, and that argument's been going on, and that war's been going on since before the Bible. Do you think that just because everyone has Twitter that's going to change? And, he really put me in my place, because I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. So sad, But anyways, we got to kind of wind this down. Was there any other point that you wanted to bring up to go out on? Well, the thing that you mentioned about, I believe parents are doing the best they can and the best they know how. But realistically, you're right. They half of them. Everyone's looking for the manual on how to raise their own kid, and nobody can find it. And they're all just trying to do what they know, and most times they're doing what they were taught or opposite of what they were, how they were raised. We see that as well.
Yeah.
And so when I was a teacher, I had kids who couldn't just sit down and do this thing we call school. I mean, they were brilliant. They were creative, but they couldn't pencil, paper, get this everyday work done. And it always bugged me because I just wanted to connect with them and get how they were thinking and help them succeed, to the point where then now fast forwarding, and 10 years ago, I attended a conference with Dr. Stuart Ablon out of Massachusetts General Hospital up at Harvard, and they have a program called Think Kids. And he was teaching 6 school districts with teens down here in Delaware back then this collaborative problem-solving approach. And it's so synced with how I thought we should treat kids, because his whole premise is kids do well if they can. And he taught us a positive approach to when the kid has a challenging behavior. And then as I became an assistant principal, I used this practice with them to the point where you could keep the connection and really find out what really went on and why when the kid acted out or did something unexpected or hit or had a misbehavior. And now that's a process that I'm teaching parents, because God bless parents, their kids shutting down or they have a meltdown and they don't know what to do, and they do all they know, and it's not helping. And so that's what I ran a course in the fall, and I'm in a course right now. So in tandem with doing these mindfulness lessons after school, it is just, I mean, these parents are taking these tools and practices, the questions, the tone of voice, the statements, and they're practicing with their kids, and they're actually utilizing it. And, it's a process, so you don't do it correct the first time. It takes time. But with this support, it's been so awesome to see parents actually learn these skills and have successes with their children.
I think you're right. I think parents are doing the best that they can do, but I think they're overloaded. Again, going back to what I was saying, and when I grew up, most of the mothers stayed home. And if there was ever a time to start talking about homeschooling, it would have been then. Because Dad took care of the finances. They didn't have to worry about money. They had enough to live a comfortable life. And if Mom wanted to start out trying that homeschooling with the kids, it would have been possible. But with both parents juggling a full-time job, you need that time that the kids are away somewhere. Because let's face it, if both parents have to work, they're going to have to pay somebody to come and homeschool their kids, and it's not going to be cheap. And the kids are going to be alone, and I mean, it's just, I can just see a disaster with all of that idea. Once you get to finish high school, I think online education for higher learning is great, because for adults, you can learn on your own time. If you want to do all your studying online at 3 a.m. on Sunday, that's great, rather than attending a university. And if it's a, Ivy League, you're paying $60,000 a year.
Oh my gosh!
you could just you could just support yourself with that. You could live in an apartment and never work and just stay home with that kind of money. So it's there's definitely a cutoff for me. 18 and up, great. We can get rid of the brick and mortar universities, but for the kids, they need that socialization. I absolutely believe that. And I think that what you're doing is wonderful. I think mindfulness for the kids, I think, is great. And I hope that this spreads around to more schools in the United States.
Yeah, I do. I'm excited. I'm actually curious to see how this after-school little Zoom thing grows, because I could just see it just totally blossoming and helping so many kids. Yeah, it's just been so fascinating to watch. And I never thought all this would happen. And now it's like, this actually really, really helps these kids. This is beautiful.
Well, and I think now that COVID is finally winding down and we can get back to a normal life, all the best for you and for your kids. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, it is educationalimpactacademy.com, www.educationalimpactacademy.com, and I'm all over on all the social media. Just look up my name, and my podcast is Momnificent. You can look that up on all the podcast platforms, or Google my name, and you'll find it.
Momnificent? Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
okay.
Isn't that great? I know.
Yeah, super. Okay, well, Karin, thanks so much for coming on. It was nice meeting you and nice conversation, and best of luck. I hope this goes well. I hope this this takes off. I think this is important, what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Douglas. I really enjoyed our talk as well.